Welcome to Real Estate Done Rightish, your favorite podcast for realtors by realtors. I'm Jen.
And I'm Annalie, and we've been working in this industry for a combined 30 years just trying to figure it out. And by figure it out, we mean
we've developed the ability to hold our bladder for exactly the length of a full listing presentation, plus drive time to the nearest gas station. Have you timed that out?
no. No.
It says we've developed the ability to like time it out. Hold our bladder.
Yeah, not time it. No.
You're like, guys, I've got 3 more minutes. Let's sign now.
I do think there are 2 types of people, though.
The holders and the non-holders.
The holders and the asked to use people's bathrooms.
Which one are you?
I will never use a person's bathroom.
Are you kidding me?
Mm-mm.
Why?
Until I know them. If I know them.
What are you afraid of?
Nothing. It just feels really intimate to like get to an appointment and be like, can I use your bathroom? So weird.
But if we're like at the end and I know I have a long drive ahead of me.
No, I'm going somewhere else.
Wow.
Yeah.
In the woods?
No, well, preferably in a bathroom. No, but maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
Depends on where you are.
You're good at that, I feel like. You grew up in the woods.
I did. Yeah. It always shocks me because I'm totally going to throw her under the bus right now, but my sister, who's an agent on my team,
Yeah.
She is a instant, just like comfortable in people's houses.
Mm-hmm.
And so usually if we're at a listing appointment together, they're like her buyers that she's known for a bit already. And they're also getting ready to sell. So I might not know them, but she already has a relationship with them. But there have been multiple times where she walks in and she's just like, hey, and she like kicks her shoes off and goes into their kitchen and like fills her water bottle. And I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And she's like, can I use your bathroom quick? And I'm like, no, we don't use bath. Like, I'm just like, I'm I'm very like,
this is your queen energy.
This is your space. I'm not going to come into it until it's time.
Oh, huh. I'm probably somewhere in the middle between the two of you. Because I feel like it's good to honor our bodies. I mean, and give them what they need.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, this is TMI, but also when I'm fishing out on the ocean, I'll go a whole day without going to the bathroom.
What?
My body just doesn't.
World.
My body just doesn't want to, or doesn't need to. I'll go if I need to go, obviously.
Oh, but you don't feel like you need to.
Mm-mm.
That's weird.
There have been like multiple days where I'm like, oh, we've been out for 12 hours and I haven't gone to the bathroom once.
That seems toxic.
Well, it's probably not great.
No, but your body's probably reabsorbing it into your bloodstream or something.
It's too much. For the people who haven't turned this off, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about a listing appointment. But before we talk about the listing appointment, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe. Also, you can follow us on Instagram. But please, take a second. I actually was looking this morning because I was like, I don't think some people know how to give it a 5-star review. So if you open up Spotify, I don't know about Apple, I'm assuming it's the same. There's like 3 little dots next to like our podcast, and you can click on the little dots and then it says rate the podcast, and then you can click on how many stars, and it's pretty easy. It takes just a second, but
I feel like on Apple it's even easier. I feel like you just have to go to the podcast page, not the episode page. So you have to like click to the main page, and then there's just a reviews area. In fact, there's like the stars sitting there, and you just click on them and then you can do it. It's pretty easy.
Yeah, so if you want to know how to say thank you, that's a wonderful way to say thank you to us.
What's happening to you?
Every once in a while, I like to practice an accent.
I think we should disclose that we usually record early in the week.
We usually record these episodes on Mondays, but because of Memorial Day, we're recording on a Friday, and it feels like we should be doing happy hour.
We have
we're doing this instead.
We're coming in with a different energy today than a normal recording day.
It's weird.
Definitely a Friday feel. I also feel like it's 5 o'clock and it's midday.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Man, what's going to happen at midnight tonight? And
It's
turn into
tomorrow.
a pumpkin.
It'll be tomorrow. It'll be fine. We'll be fine.
Okay, so today we're talking about listing presentation. Full disclosure, if you get our newsletter, and if you don't, you can sign up for it in the show notes. But if you do get our newsletter, I promised you we were going to do a role play of Annalie's full listing presentation today. Upon further discussion, we have decided to pivot. So we're going to do part 1 of probably 3 of her full listing appointment, because we can role play, but we understand that for a lot of us, it's like, well, why do you do it that way? There's questions and there's strategy behind it. So rather than just do the role play, we're going to still break it down. We're going to do bits and pieces of role play and break it down. So today, Annie, we're covering which parts?
This is part 1. So when I come into the home, we're going to start there. So it's what happens when we walk in the door. We're going to talk the first 3 topics. I literally have an agenda. We'll post this, or if you can sign up to get this. Sign up to get it? Is that how it works?
Yeah, we can put a link to just this form, or you know what? It actually probably would be easier if you go down, scroll down to the show notes, click on Join Our Nonsense. That's our newsletter, and we'll send that out this week. How's
Perfect.
that?
Yeah. Okay. So my agenda is it changes a little bit depending on if they're a sell buy. We're going to cover that in a later portion of this series. It also changes a little bit based on that pre-qualification phone call that we had, or a a questionnaire that I send out. Yep. I may add things or I may take things away depending on.
So we're just going to do the most.
Gone. So we're going to do the basic. Like, this is a basic seller. We're not going to talk about selling and buying in this context. My agenda is going to be my basic agenda. It's a 9-part agenda of everything we talk about.
So the first 3 parts are
goals.
What are their goals, you mean?
Yep. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to go through agency, relationships.
Which seems boring, but it's super helpful to hear how Annalie does that. Yeah.
I think it's the most important thing that you can do.
Yep. Yeah.
And we're going to talk about agency in a couple different ways. I know that not everyone, we're in the state of Minnesota. We have a very specific agency relationships disclosure in Minnesota. I know that I think every state has some form of that. But I don't think it's always its own form.
Okay.
We'll talk about that a little bit more.
Okay.
So we're going to go through ours, and then I would love to hear from people in different states if they have questions about how would you present this, or it's just this little blurb. Would you still break it out and talk about it? We'll get into that. And then the next thing I talk about is a little bit about me. I have a resume and a little bit about my team. So it's a 2-sided resume. And we're just going to go through kind of how I talk about that. It's a very short portion of my listing presentation because I don't think people care that much. So,
okay. All right.
So
on your mark.
Yes.
Yeah,
so if I walked in and you're the seller, we are going to do some role playing and then some like sidebars, if that's okay.
Yeah, for sure.
So if I walked in, you'd greet me at the door. A lot of people are instantly like, okay, do you want us to show you around? And I'm like, nope, let's sit down first. And I kind of set the precedent of, we're going to sit down. We're going to talk about some things. I'm going to kind of go over the agenda, make sure that we're on the same page about what we want to cover today. We're going to talk about some things, and then we're going to get up and do a walkthrough of your home. It'll be kind of our break in the middle. This is going to take 60 to 90 minutes, more than likely. My listing appointments are a little bit longer, I think, than a lot of people's. And so we're going to have kind of a mid appointment break. And then we're going to come back and we're going to sit back down, and we're going to finish up with all the numbers and the grit of the appointment. And so, wherever you feel comfortable sitting, dining room or kitchen table is great, is usually kind of how I set that up. But I just set that up right at the door. Petting dogs, saying hi to kids,
Yeah. Okay.
Getting all this stuff.
Okay.
So then we sit down, and the first thing I do is present the agenda, which again, if you sign up, we'll send that out to you. Really basic. I just go through.
I just adjusted my chair.
You're so tiny. Why are you
literally
like a child?
I wanted to do that so I could shift my chair.
Oh.
And now the arms, I can't. I look like a child, a baby.
Yeah, you got to get.
All right. Sorry, everybody, for that.
Hey, that's real. We're sitting at a table, and all of a sudden the seller does something weird with their chair.
Okay, here we are. Okay,
so I'm just the first thing I tell them is, okay, this is the agenda that I have planned today. Let's just quickly touch on this and make sure that it's going to cover everything you want it to, or is there anything we can just cross off? So I've had appointments where I'm like, we talked about this on the phone and I just exit out, or we're not going to talk about this today. Today, we're going to focus on the 3 parts of this that you need to take the next step, whatever that is. If I already know that, then we're going to go through that right now, but I'm just going to go through it for the sake of this exercise, the whole thing. So I'm going to say, I know we already talked a little bit about why I'm here and your goals. We're just going to touch back on that. And this is especially if I only talk to one of them on the phone, which is usually the case, and there's 2 people, I want to make sure I'm hearing their side of things or having them validate that conversation as well. The next thing we're going to go through is the one legal document that I'm going to have you sign today. It is a legal disclosure. It's called agency relationships. So we'll go through that. I'll explain what that means. Sometimes it's really good too, because I can see if they kind of bristle or give each other a look when I bring that we're going to sign a document. And that just tells me kind of where they are a little bit. So that's kind of a nice little litmus. A little bit about me and my team. I'm going to just touch on that. We're going to talk about your home. We're just going to make sure that the research and the things that you told me kind of match up. I'm just going to realign because I've brought data today that's in alignment with that. I want to just make sure that my data matches what your home is actually representing. So we're going to touch on that a little bit. Then we're going to dig into numbers. The next conversation is all about numbers. We're going to start by talking about the macroeconomics of real estate in your market right now. When I say your market, I'm talking about the Twin Cities, which is a 16 county metro area. It's a huge area, macro. Look at the market. I don't ever go national. This is sidebar, but I don't go national or talk about big trends unless they ask about things that they've seen. For instance, you just brought up before this recording that there's starting to be headlines all over that the nationwide, we are flipping into a buyer's market for the first time in, I think it's
Over
like 10 years or over 12 years. Probably 2015 is the last buyer's market that was out there, 2014. That's not the case in all markets in the Twin Cities. Now, there are markets in the Twin Cities that are buyer's markets, small condos, buyer's market. But for the most part, I think we're still pretty firmly in a seller's market here. So I'm only going to address national items if they want to, or if they've heard things. I just explained, we're going to start with the macro. We're going to kind of justify that to your neighborhood and make sure that your market, your semi-less macro, we'll call this like the medio market analysis, that's in line with how the general market is behaving. And then we're going to dig into comparables, your market for your home, your actual comparable market analysis or your CMA. That's going to roll right into pricing. Today, we're not going to pick a price because we're not going to market today. We're going to pick a price range to discuss, and we're going to go through what's called a net sheet, which is going to explain every single fee that you possibly can incur when selling your home. So that's going to give you some really nice bottom lines. In that, we're going to talk about commissions. We're going to talk about different things. If you have more questions about your options when it comes to paying commission, we'll go deeper into that. Then we're going to talk about your path to market. So I'm going to leave here today and we're going to have a bunch of things that we need to do before we're ready to go live. We're going to touch on that. I've actually got, that's in my pre-listing box as well, the laminated version of that so they can kind of keep track of their path. And then we're going to answer any questions. Does this sound like it's going to cover everything that you want to cover?
Yes, it does. Yeah, thank you.
Probably then some.
Yeah, I'm guessing.
And so I will kind of say to people, we're going to spend more time on some of this and less time on others.
Okay, so for those of you that aren't on YouTube, I'm just going to give you a quick cliff note here. Annalie has a one-sheet agenda that has 9 points on it. She slid the agenda over to me, facing me, and is just giving me an overview, which to me feels very much like she knows where we're going. I'm sitting back. She's going to educate me. That felt really nice from my perspective.
Yeah, and I haven't always used an agenda. I think I started in like 2018.
Yeah.
And it shifted everything. Like just having an outline and them knowing what to expect.
Yeah.
And then some people will literally be like, well, we don't really, like, I don't know. They won't say we don't care, but they'll be like, you'll note I don't have marketing on here. Sometimes people are like, well, we really want to talk about marketing. I'm like, great, that's going to be the next appointment. I want to make sure that you want to hire me and we're in alignment before we're even going to go into my marketing plan, because my marketing plan is really specific for each home and each market. And so, depending on your property, I may need to market it differently. And so I'm not going to prepare that or put my time and money into it until we decide that we're in alignment. And that's what today is about.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
So that's why it's not on this. Now I do, I should say, I typically, not always, but I typically do a 2-part listing appointment. Not in that I show up and don't give them any information. You'll note I have all the numbers at this appointment, which is, I think, different than other agents do a 2-parter. A 2-parter is usually like, let me come and do a walkthrough so I know what your house looks like. And then I will come back with all of the data. I'm bringing the data right away because data and pricing makes sure we're in alignment, and then it makes sense for us to take next steps. My second part is going to be a marketing plan, and then paperwork.
Yeah.
And then starting to work for them and moving through that process. And that could be 2 days later, or it could be on a Zoom. I've already been to their house. I don't necessarily need to be in front of them again in person. So that a lot of times I'll do that on a Zoom. People like that. They're like, oh, paperwork at 8 p.m. on Zoom. Great. Instead of having to have me out again.
Do we want to talk about that right now? Paperwork, pros and cons, or it doesn't seem like the right time right now?
I think
Because you wouldn't bring that up at the beginning of an appointment.
No.
Okay. We'll come back to that.
I do bring it up when I hit on agency.
You do?
I'd
Okay.
say we're not signing anything else today.
Okay. So I just want to give this disclaimer because as somebody who's somebody different than you, and also
somebody who's a somebody.
And I feel like I'm a broken record when I say this, but I've seen many agents, I've coached agents that have lost out on an opportunity because they didn't get it signed at the appointment.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of around always be closing, like this idea of closing. And there are pros and cons to that. There's a way to do reverse selling, which is essentially what you're doing. You're doing a takeaway. You're saying, we're not going to sign paperwork today.
Yeah.
And for some people, they go, wait, why? That does something to people psychologically that are like, you don't want me. Well, now I want you. It's the classic, like wanting to chase thing. And that's not always advantageous. And I would say that you have 20 some years on your side and a lot of experience. And so I'm a little hesitant to put out there that everybody should do that your way.
I don't think everybody should.
Yeah.
I think that this has shifted. And especially when I'm talking to newer agents, I really make sure that everything I do has been 21 years of trial and error for me, for my personality, for what feels good to me and genuine to me. And that is why it's worked for me. If this is not alignment with where you are in the business, how long you've been in the business, what kind of clients you're going after, if any of that is not in alignment, this isn't going to work for you.
Yeah.
So this is my way. It's not my way or the highway. It should be my way is an option, or take little bits from this and then continue. I mean, I change this. I always tell people, I could talk about this every 3 months because it's about every 10 listing appointments, this shifts.
Yeah.
Because consumer behavior is shifting all of the time and things that matter are shifting.
Yep.
In a buyer's market, marketing means more to sellers. They care more. I'm going to have to talk about it at least a little bit in this initial appointment, or they're just going to be like, well, you're not going to do anything for us. You know, these other agents are talking about everything they're going to do to sell our house. And so,
Yeah. Okay, good. I just wanted to draw that out like very clearly for some people because,
Yeah. I mean, and that goes for every single thing we're going to talk about.
Yep. Okay.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's dive in.
Okay.
Let's dive in. That's what the podcast hosts say. They say, let's dive in.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it.
Okay. So just right off the bat, we already talked about goals a little bit on the phone. But tell me again, what brought us to the table? Because sometimes when I say, what is your goal? They're like, what do you mean? So I just say, what caused us to be sitting here today? What is the goal moving forward? That's what I mean by goals. And so then I just ask them to share that. Again, if there is a party there that was not on the phone call, then I say, I might just validate. So when we talked on the phone, you talked a little bit about, you aren't sure if you're going to rent this or sell it, for instance. And so really numbers is the most important thing today. Right. And then I'll say, Katie, you weren't on that call. Is that kind of in alignment with what your expectation for today is as well? Or it might be you're thinking about moving up north. You're both working remotely and you're thinking about getting on a lake 3 hours out of the city. That's super exciting. Love it. Is that in alignment with what your expectation is today? Because we're going to have a different conversation.
Do you talk time frame when you talk goals then too? Are you saying like, what's your goal in terms of how quickly you would like to sell? Or you bring that out?
Well, how quickly you want to go to market?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, it depends again on the situation. If they're really just looking for information to bring to a lender to talk about a bridge loan, I'm not talking about timing to market because that's going to be the next conversation. If they're a seller that's just like, we know we have some things to do, a lot of times that'll kind of come out when we're doing a walkthrough in the home. We'll talk about, ideally, when would you want all of this stuff to be done? Well, when we can get it done. Okay. Do you have a goal date? Should we set a goal date? And that also comes up in path to market because there is a go live date that's on my path to market. Usually we start there and I say, in an ideal world, what would that be?
Okay.
And then we work backwards. So that's actually kind of later. I don't necessarily talk about it on the top end.
So you're really looking to get motivation.
Yeah.
Motivation.
Okay. Motivation, and what do I need to make sure I'm talking about? Because where they're going or what their plans are can cause create a completely different conversation.
Yeah.
So I want to know, and I want to be able to reference it throughout, right? If it's an exciting move, I want to reference that throughout. If it's a divorce and it's kind of going to be an emotional, harder move, like they're in their dream house and they're both going to be renting condos and they're bummed. I'm going to reference that throughout this meeting. And I'm going to say, I know this wasn't your plan. Or I know, so I want to know that just because I'm going to bring it back to that motivation again. Why are we doing this? And again, in like a sad situation, I might say, like, I know, like, I'm really sorry that we're here. I wish it was for a more fun reason, like, and then I focus on something positive. So, and when we get through this, you get to focus on the next phase, which is the good phase.
That's
So
good.
like, let's get through this part. So I'm always looking to like,
That's so good.
keep bringing it back to that.
I'm going to pause you for just a second if that's
Yeah,
okay. Because what's
absolutely.
coming to my mind right now is that the quadrant, there's a quadrant that you bring. It's a sale. I hate to even call it sales, but to me, it's sometimes it's leadership when you bring people through this path, and it's a quadrant that starts with their negative present. So or actually, it starts with their positive present. So if we're talking just about their house and not about why they're moving, but usually the two are really intertwined. So like, tell me what you've loved about your property. Because that's a really safe place for people to start. So square one, which is in the upper left-hand corner, is tell me what you've loved about your property, what you've loved about your time here. Great, we can use that when we look to sell the home. Okay, now tell me what brought us here today.
Yeah.
Then that moves down to the negative present. What's the pain point is what you're looking for. And that is for people that are on the fence about deciding to sell or deciding to move. I'm going to just pull back the curtain. When we were recruiting, that was the point that we spent most time in because we want people to understand the pain point. And if they don't make a change, what happens?
Sure.
So what happens if you do make a change and what happens if you don't make a change? And the if I don't make a change moves into the negative future. If I don't make a change, this is the negative side of what could happen. If I do make a change, and then it moves up into the right-hand quadrant, which is a positive future. And so not that you want to take that diagram out in an appointment with somebody, but for you in your mind to be able to be taking people through that process. And that's exactly, to me, what you just said. You're like, I'm sorry, we're here. Here's the pain moment.
Yep.
And to do it with that level of empathy is so amazing. And then say, and the good news is on the other side of this, here's what the positive future can look like, which is amazing.
Yeah.
You're just doing that intuitively.
Yeah, and it kind of keeps coming up throughout as well, especially if it's a non-fun reason to sell. Like if we are truly getting ready to flip back into a buyer's market, a lot of people are selling for reasons they don't want to.
Yeah.
It's financial. It's they're losing money on the house or they're barely making any money. I mean, for years that was every listing appointment, which was so much fun, right? But like tears at every listing appointment. People just devastated that if they were lucky enough to get a buyer, it was going to be at a big loss. And how do we navigate that? Right.
Yeah.
So if we're getting ready for that, I think getting really good at being really soft and empathetic and saying like, we have solutions. You're not going to like many of them, but they're the only option. Like they are the solution. And so we're going to have to just come at that like head on and make it as easy as possible, but trying to, come from a place of softness and empathy, especially in those situations.
That's great. Okay.
So we get through goals and then I'm just, like I said, I'm just consistently flipping back to that throughout the appointment. Okay. Now we're going to talk about agency relationships. And again, I'm going to talk a little bit about, just the differences in different states. I know in Wisconsin, for instance, because we are kind of practically a border city. I believe that agency is not even its own form. I believe it's part of buyer rep or listing contract because there are differences in states. Some states are consumer protection states and some are not. And consumer protection states, from my understanding, again, disclaimer, not an attorney, we just have a lot deeper disclosure requirements. So like Minnesota paperwork, our average purchase agreement packet is pushing 40 to 50 pages. I think in Wisconsin, it's like 8 total. There's just, everything that we have a separate form for is like a clause in
Yeah.
their paperwork. So yours might look completely different than this. I'm just going to quickly touch on what is an agency relationship, because I think if you don't understand this, or you're skirting over it, or you're not taking advantage of explaining it, you're missing out on opportunities. I was taught really early on by one of my early bosses. He kind of took this as his like superpower going through agency, and there's lots of little tidbits that I'll talk about. But it was a way that he signed a ton of clients, was literally using agency disclosure. So what is it in general? So an agency relationship, and this is according to NAR, the National Association of Realtors, an agency relationship is a legal and ethical arrangement where a real estate agent acts on behalf of a client who's the principal in the transaction to represent their interests in a real estate transaction. Okay?
Yep.
Great. A legal and ethical arrangement where the agent is working on behalf of the client. I always tell people that today you're a consumer and I am an agent. When you choose to hire me, you go from consumer to client. That's the difference. Today you're just a human. Every human in the world is a consumer. When you choose to hire me, you become my client. And that activates things that agency is going to tell you about. So typical agency disclosures, and again, I don't know what they look like for every single state, but typically they're going to go through what the different types of relationships are and what that relationship means. So when you hire me, what happens? Fiduciary duties get activated. Fiduciary duties are legal obligations that I then owe you. So I'm gonna go through now kind of how I talk about it.
All right,
okay,
let's do it.
So this is the first form that I have to go through. On ours, it says Minnesota law requires, underlined right at the top, this is like sidebar, but very helpful, because I will literally say Minnesota law requires that I bring this out before we start talking about price, terms, or motivation. So before we get into a deeper conversation where I know more about you, I know about your financials, I know about your wants, about why you want a certain amount of money for this home. I know about your situation. You've already just told me a little bit about that in goals, but I don't want to whip this out before we even talk about anything, So at the very top of our conversation, I need to be bringing this document out. This is a disclosure only. It's not a contract for representation. In fact, I call it the anti-contract. It is really letting you know what happens when you choose to sign a contract with an agent and why you might want to choose to do that earlier rather than later, or why you might want to wait. So this is just a disclosure. I am going to have you sign this today. And what this does is it shows compliance to the Commerce Department, who in the state of Minnesota regulates our licensing. It tells them that I'm doing my job and I'm talking to you about this. If I were ever to get audited by them, they would want to see my calendar with all my appointments and matching agency forms to go with all of those. So this just sits on a file on my desk. I also often will just take a picture of this, by the way, at the appointment at the end and leave the paper copy with them.
Oh, okay.
And then just upload a scan from my phone.
Okay.
So what this first section talks about is what happens when you choose to hire an agent. So there's 4 different ways that you can hire a real estate agent. I'll jump forward a little bit onto page 2. What happens when you choose to hire somebody is that now I owe you legal obligations. I am legally obliged to do what you need me to do to sell your home. Before you sign a contract with me, I don't owe you anything. Why this is important is that if you choose to list with somebody else tomorrow, and we've had conversations today, if I bring a buyer to your house and I'm negotiating, I can use anything we talked about today against you in that negotiation. I don't owe you anything today. If you hire me, I instantly owe you anything. And even if I did bring in a buyer, I now owe you these fiduciary duties, which means I cannot talk about anything that we've talked about today. Okay. So that's why a lot of people want to hire somebody sooner rather than later. The fiduciaries that I will owe you when you hire me are loyalty, obedience, disclosure, confidentiality, reasonable care, and accounting, kind of a legal light set of fiduciary duties. And the way that you get those activated is by choosing to hire me in one of 4 ways. There's a seller's broker. That would be us, me listing your home. It's my sign in the yard. You're actually hiring my entire brokerage, not just me. There's a broker. She's a real human. And we all work as agents of her. So we're all working as arms of her. We're working on her behalf. She has a little bit higher legal standard and legal rights as the broker. She's in charge of all of us. So you're hiring everybody under what I call her broker umbrella. So just think of her standing there with an umbrella and all these little agents. And there's about 275 agents in our office. So you're hiring 275 people when you hire me to work on your behalf. If you're buying as well, or if you were buying a home, then buyer's broker would be another type of agreement that you could get into. I go through what that looks like. Dual agency, that would be if any of the people under that broker umbrella bring in a buyer. That could be me. In my case, it wouldn't be me because I don't work with buyers anymore, but it could be someone on my team. It could be anybody in my office. I might not even know who they are, but they're another agent in my office. I don't know all 270 whatever people in my office. If any of them bring in a buyer, what happens is dual agency would activate. And in that case, we can't, the law kicks in and says we can't negotiate to the detriment of either party. So we kind of have to be Switzerland. We have to make sure that we're not disclosing anything that could be harmful to the other side. So I can't go to them and say, I know they'll take $5,000 less. They can't come to me and say, their parents have a lot of money. They're willing to do whatever it takes to get this done, right? We have to make sure we're protecting both parties. Otherwise, it really feels like a normal transaction. We just have to make sure that we're not accidentally disclosing anything, really. And the only time that, to me, really feels like it activates would be if it was me. If I was bringing the buyer in, I would know everything about them, and I would really just have to be careful about terms. But again, in my situation, it would not be me because I don't represent buyers.
Okay.
Fourth would be a facilitator. This would be like, let's say you were going to sell this home to your cousin. You had already come up with all the terms, timelines. You knew exactly what you wanted that transaction to look like, and you just needed somebody to come in and do paperwork and make sure it was legally and ethically compliant. I could facilitate that transaction. That would mean no one had full representation. I was there literally to just facilitate the transaction and make sure that it gets to closing. So I'm just kind of an overseer and making sure that paperwork is legally and ethically filled out correctly. I do in that case also make sure, typically we all sit down at the same table, and I just make sure everybody's aware of what terms they're agreeing to, because a lot of times people are not sure. And then the final disclosure on this form is regarding predatory offender information. This is the registered offender list. You do not need to know this as a seller. It is not your job to disclose or know if anybody in your neighborhood is on that list. It is only the buyer's job. The website is here for the buyers to check on that. Any questions about this?
I'm just actually thinking, if this was really me, I can see why people are like, can we sign?
Yeah.
Because we're about to get into the meat of the appointment. And I actually had this happen to me in I did this version of your thing, and she was really hesitant to share any information with me after that. Mm-hmm. She was skittish. She was like, well, now I'm not sure what I should tell you or not because you don't legally represent me. Mm-hmm. And she's like a 12-month out potential, so she wasn't ready to sign a contract, but it did make her skittish.
Yeah.
So it does its job. So do you get that pushback ever where people up front are like, well, we're going to be pretty tight-lipped in this appointment because you just, no. Because people trust you because you just showed them what a professional you are.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, they've already made their decision at that point probably that they're going to hire you.
Yeah. I will also, if I know I'm in competition and I know other agents have been in the door, I will throw out before I start this conversation, well, you've already heard this and you've already seen this form because it's legally required that every agent goes through it with you. And I said, so how deep do you want me to go? Did the other agent explain it in a way that you felt really good about? And they'll be like, we've never seen that form before. And I say, well, unfortunately, that agent chose to break the law on the first time they sat down with you.
This is where Annie's a friggin' shark.
And I say, I'm really sorry that happened. We're going to make sure that you really understand it because this is extremely important. And so that's one of the ways that we use it to like tweak it to other people. If I know other people are coming in after me, I say, I just want to reiterate at the end, I'll say, I just want to reiterate that you need to sign this with every single agent, and every single agent needs to disclose this to you. So if you have other agents coming after me, if they don't bring this out, just put a little note in your notes that they're breaking the law. On their first appointment with you.
I like that you're such a boss. This is great.
Well,
this is
it's
the
true.
law.
It's
It
the
is
law.
the law.
It's the law.
And
So
many agents aren't doing it, and it's not a consumer. It's because of consumer protection that it's a law.
Yeah,
it's to protect the consumer.
Yeah. And that's if I didn't say that, I will say, this is to protect you and to make sure that you understand where we stand.
Yeah.
At any given point in our relationship. Mm-hmm. Today, this is where we are. Moving forward, when you sign with me, I all of a sudden activate all of these fiduciaries and I am beholden to you. Mm-hmm. And I have to, confidentiality is the biggest one, right? You can't talk about anything you know about that person with anybody. So, yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay, so then we sign this, and I say, great. You just had the most stressful part. You had to sign your name, and we kind of move along. So the next thing we're going to talk about is just a little bit about me. I do have, it's usually two-sided. I just printed it. So I have a printed out resume. It has my mission statement on it. It has information about how to get a hold of me. It's usually printed on really nice paper. If you're watching this on YouTube, it's not today. I didn't waste the really nice paper. And it just has my experience. Note if you're making a resume, make it easy on yourself and put the years that things happen, not the time, because then you don't ever have to update it.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah.
So the only thing that I say, it's got my professional like designations that I have on here. It's got my where I went to college on here. So what I would say is put on there whatever makes you unique, different, right? So what all I say when I put this out to them is, this is my resume. Nobody really cares too much about that. In fact, I don't really even care too much about this. The only thing that I think is unique about me is that real estate's all I've ever done. It is my only career. I started when I was a junior in college, and oopsies, it's been 24 years and here I still am. And so they're like, oh, and then if they want to ask questions about things I've done, I've held different, leadership positions, things like that, but nobody usually cares. But sometimes someone will be like, oh, that's really interesting. Well, why did you get in? Right. And then we can have that little connection moment. But that is my spiel. It's like a 1-sentence spiel.
Okay.
Cool. I flip it over and I just say, and on the back is my entire team. And the only reason this matters to you is that this is kind of my boots on the ground marketing team. You will not interact with them. You will not interact with my assistant. You will not interact with anybody except for me, because I'm a little bit of a control freak when it comes to my sellers. You get me and only me. However, because if you think back to that dual agency conversation we just had on the agency disclosure, because I don't work with buyers, I also don't want to interface with any of your potential buyers. And what I mean by that is I am not going to be in an open house, and I'm not going to be talking to your potential buyer unless we get in a real bind and something strange happens with scheduling or somebody gets sick, then I might step in. But my goal is that I'm not talking to your buyer, because I don't want to hear someone's sob story and fall in love with that person. And then it goes into multiple offers. And what if subconsciously I am pushing you to take that offer, even if it's not the best offer for you? So I like to keep a little bit of distance, arm's length from any potential buyers. So that's what my buyer's agents are for. My buyer's agents are there to talk to potential buyers. They will also take any sign calls that come in on your home. They will show your home to any potential buyers that come in through our marketing or through our lead sources. And they will also talk to any internet leads. So my buyer's agent team is taking care of all of that. That is why they're important. And that's what differentiates us a little bit. Any questions about any of that?
I don't. But okay. I, side note, want to make some points on that.
Absolutely.
This may be a no-brainer, and I don't want it to go unsaid that obviously there was a time when you were a solo agent and you did everything. And there are pros, cons to all of it. And it's, we communicate what we want to communicate and how and why and where we're at. And I think it's all, I'm like, is that dishonest? But it's not. Like, it's just how your business is built and why you have it that way right now. It could very easily be advantageous to say, yeah, I love to be in open houses because I get to hear buyers and they haven't signed an agency contract with me and I don't owe them anything. And so if I hear that they are cash buyers and what their motivation is and how high they're willing to go, you better believe I'm going to work that to your benefit.
Yeah.
So there's always a way to show a pro 100%. And a con on all of that, no matter who's listening and how your business is being built.
100%.
They're all true advantage, disadvantage. They're all true. Yeah.
When I was an individual agent, I would talk about all the reasons why me doing everything was the best thing for them.
Yeah.
Right. I think you can always talk about the pros of where you are in your business and what it looks like and why that's the best thing for them.
Yeah.
I spend very little time on this because honestly, I think that there are businesses that are built in 5 million different ways that all work. Like they're
benefits.
all great for clients, or the client might have the same experience, or whatever. So I don't spend a ton of time on this, but it is, again, when I started doing this, it was just a way to talk about myself really fast without really having to talk about myself.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
seen other listing presentations that have like 3 pages all about the
Stats
person and stats and everything they do. And I never talk about any of that. I never bring up stats. I never bring up anything about myself other than this, which
Yeah.
is, again, is it right? No. Is it my way? It's just my way. I just
Yeah.
don't talk about myself a lot unless they've really indicated that they want to know my track record,
Yeah.
or they're really concerned because they're selling a $2 million house and am I a luxury agent, right? Or, whatever it might be. I
Right.
work land a little bit, and I had the very first land deal I took. They're like, well, what do you know about land? Have you ever sold land? I hadn't. I just came in with all of my knowledge, and I joined the land division of Keller Williams, and I did things to make myself all of a sudden a land agent, you know? So, yeah, sorry.
That's okay. Okay.
Yeah. Other questions, sidebars, thoughts that we need to cover on these. This is the first section. It's all we really plan to talk about today.
No, I think it's really good. I mean, what's coming to mind is that everything we do communicates something. And it communicates something that you don't spend 45 minutes boasting about your stats. But the way that you are walking through everything up until this point communicates your level of professionalism and your time in the industry. And so the stats are a moot point.
Yeah.
You know, and if when I was new as a new agent, then I'm leaning heavy on my resume and going, I'm new in the industry, but I do want to tell you, here's what I brought to the table in all of my other careers and industries and why I think my variety is going to help you out.
Yeah.
And here's what I know about myself. I'm a problem solver. I'm very proactive. I'm great at communication, and I've got an amazing team around me. And so I would lean on other things depending on where you're at. But I think, again, the way you're setting all of that up is just people haven't even gotten the information yet, but they know a lot about you based on how you're presenting everything. And again, everybody's personality, I was just thinking about different personality profiles, and some people are going to win people over with a little bit more charisma, and they're got generator energy, and you come into a room and it's the connection piece is way bigger.
Yep.
So those people might do a tour of the home first because they're looking for all the ways to build rapport right out of the gate.
Yep.
Because that's their strong suit. And so this is where I do think, whether it's a mentor or a colleague or a coach or somebody that can help you be objective about what your unique strengths and skills are and how to lean on those for success. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know that, I just taught a class for new agents the other day, and it had nothing to do with listing homes. It was about lead follow-up. But there's so much hesitance to do anything wrong when you're newer, because you can't afford to lose anything.
Yeah.
And you're never gonna, like I told them, I'm like, your first listing appointment is not gonna look like your 5th listing appointment.
Yeah.
It's not gonna look like your 10th listing appointment. It shouldn't, right?
Yeah.
You should be afterwards coming back and saying, what really went well there? What did I fumble on? What do I need to work on? What skills do I need to work on? And then what just didn't land, right? Like what parts were they just kind of zoning out at, or what parts weren't engaging? Is that a me skill problem, or do they even need that information at this time?
Yeah.
And so I think if you can consistently be auditing yourself, literally, I think in 2018, after every single listing appointment, I tweaked something.
Yeah.
Like I changed one little
always
thing.
Editing. I would say this too, whether you're new or not, there's a lot of value. When you're doing this many times a month, that is your practice in essence. And you've been doing this for 20 some years. But I will say that for myself included, I'm doing this right now with the prospecting that I'm doing. I am role playing every day. And if I was working in corporate America and I had a pitch that I knew could land me a bonus for $20K, you better believe I'm practicing that pitch.
Yeah.
I'm practicing it.
Yeah.
So what I don't get with some realtors is why they don't practice.
Yeah.
Because it feels fake. And it's like, if you're going to sing in front of an audience, you're going to practice.
Yeah.
So there's an element of just being able, the way that you went through agency obviously is practiced. It's memorized. You could say, it's just that you probably say the same thing without even realizing it. But I'm not really sure why agents are so resistant to that, if they just feel silly.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, you need somebody to practice a listing. Everything else you could kind of just hit record and record yourself. You probably need somebody to sit there just to look you in the eyes and like do a fake listing presentation with. But if you're both new, it's way better to get vulnerable in front of that person than it is in front of like showtime, and you're going to like try to hit a home run without ever having gotten up to the plate.
Right.
Like practice.
Well, and I think that the first thing I would practice is all the contracts.
Oh yeah.
So really knowing agency, like read it 35 times.
Why
know
not?
exactly what it says.
One thing I'm doing lately too is reading things out loud into my voice memo, and then I'll just play it in the car over and over and over and over and over. Because I'm like, this is my job right now.
Well, the very first team I was on, and I was not licensed, I was just an administrative assistant. We had a Monday morning, I think it was, team meeting. And there was a part of that was present a contract. And it was, you didn't know who was going to get called on, and you didn't know what it was going to be that was going to be presented. A piece of paper got slid to you and it said, present this to the team. And the team was like 14 agents. It was big. And I got put in that pile of like, you also need to know this. I was a marketing specialist, but I was working with all of our listings. And he's like, you better know what every single listing document says inside and out, because if the seller has a question when you're there and I'm not, you need to be able to answer it competently. And so I literally went over every form with my dog. Like I presented to my dog.
Yeah.
Her name was Jameson. I joked for years that I sold her like 32 houses my first year. But I just would go over it and over it and over it because I didn't want to look like a buffoon in that meeting. And I didn't know when I was going to get called on.
That's so great that he did that. I love that.
Yeah. And it just created a standard on our team. You know contracts. And I think that if you're new or you're not new, if you are not competent in contracts, start there.
Yeah.
Because just that, like I think I shared with you earlier that I will often, when I'm going through contracts with people, whether it's a purchase agreement, a buyer rep, whatever it is, and in any of our contracts, the feedback is, oh, we can tell you've done that 1,000 times.
Yeah.
And they just instantly feel calm because I'm not stumbling over my words. I'm not like rereading something to see what it says. I actually just had that happen with a seller. The way I was presenting a clause in the listing rep, he was like, I'm not signing it because of that clause. And I was like, well, let me reread it because maybe my words aren't saying it as eloquently as it should be said. And when I reread it, I was not representing what the clause actually said. I was using one word that was not in alignment. And I said, this is really embarrassing. I've said this to probably 150 clients and I've been saying it wrong. This is what the sentence actually says. This is what that actually means. Thank you for stopping me and pausing me because now I can make sure that I'm doing it correctly moving forward. But it was like, this was 2 months ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. And even that, just for people to hear wherever they're at in their journey, it's like we all make mistakes and we're all have to clean it up.
Contracts are changing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that was a clause that, again, like I think I had just misread it when it had gotten added at some point to the listing rep contract. I think I just misread it, and I thought it meant something different than it did, and it did not. So I changed it. So, but I think if you could, anybody, if that is not your strength, make it your strength. Like.
Well, yeah. And
ASAP.
if you go through that's one of the main things you go through an appointment, especially agency and relationship out of the gate.
Yeah.
They're going to make assumptions based on how well you can present that.
Yeah. And if you're presenting it.
Yeah. And if you're presenting it. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So good.
All right.
Okay. So that's it for this episode. In terms of the listing presentation. And then in the next episode of the listing presentation, we're going to talk about how I talk about their home. We're going to talk about the walkthrough a little bit because their home leads into going and doing that walkthrough. So I'll talk about my way of doing a walkthrough. And then we'll talk about how I go through market analysis and pricing, net sheet and commission talks. I think we'll hit all of that in the next one. It might be a little bit a longer episode. Okay, great.
Okay.
That's all for this week's episode of Real Estate Done Rightish. Until next time.
Cheers to doing it rightish. We'll try. I'll just do it as fast as it feels. Okay. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general knowledge and informational purposes only and do not constitute professional, legal, or financial advice. As licensed real estate agents in the state of Minnesota, we are not attorneys, financial advisors, or tax professionals, and we cannot provide advice in those areas or in regards to any agency or broker-specific topics in any other state. Any reliance you place on the information provided in this podcast is strictly at your own risk. We strongly encourage you to consult with qualified professionals for specific guidance related to your individual circumstances.
Wow! That was good. All right. Holy sh- Okay,
Anyway.
so today we're wait, before we talk about all the things, actually, why don't you ask the people today? Ask them with a smile on your face. Do you know what to ask them?
If you like us,
Yeah.
smash that follow button.
Yeah.
Please just push it with whatever energy you have.
Push it.
The button.
Oh.
Jen. Push the button. Smash it. Tap it. Click it.
Snap it. This is
We might
getting
have to start over.
really weird. This is weird. Uh-oh. Oh my gosh. Okay, for real though, when you I couldn't pee my pants.
Bop it. Push it. Twist it. Turn it. Click. I could have saved it if I would have pulled the bop it in, but I didn't fast enough. There was no saving that.
Okay, are we
When I
starting-
said click it, I got it was too much. I said, "Oh
Are we starting
no."
all the way over?
Probably.
Let's start all the way over.
I'm sweating now.
I am too. Ah, jeez. Okay. I'm going to do a different opening.
Okay.
That didn't make you laugh. I want to make you laugh.
Oh, okay.
Hold
I
on,
feel
please.
like our lighting does not make me look as good as it ususually does.
Well, what the hell is
They usually look
happening?
better.
It's because I think we need to have those other lights out. I put them away.
Did we have them out before? I don't think
Yeah.
we've ever used those.
Yeah, some days we do.
I don't think so.
You look good in the light right now.
Whatever.
I think